Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Welcome to the Disappearing Mind podcast. I'm Dawn Platt, your host, dementia coach, dementia advocate, and memory care professional. In previous generations, caregiving happened quietly, within families, with your physician, in trusted community circles. Today, deeply personal decisions are shared publicly, often in social media platforms like Facebook, where advice and opinions flow freely, sometimes too freely. I wanted to do this podcast, and it's the second in a series in and around social media because social media is pretty new to the caregiving space. We didn't used to have conversations like we have now on social media, and we didn't have so many experts available to us and opinionated people. So I really wanted to do these podcasts because they're influential in the caregiver setting. And that's something that not a lot of people talk about. I wanted to. I hope that you're ready to listen today. I hope that you take some of these things to heart. And I hope that the advice I give is helpful to you on your dementia caregiving journey. The title of today's podcast is When Caregivers Turn on Each Other and Why Judgment Happens. I talk to a lot of families. I've been doing this a long time, and it's something that comes up now, and people are actually influenced heavily, as am I, in different aspects. But in caregiving, it's a little bit different by people they don't even know, people they may never meet, and people who say a lot of things that we need to weigh. I think that's important. But the challenge is that we have no reliable way of verifying who these people truly are, what their credentials may or may not be, and what their motives might be. I mean, people have all kinds of motives. And if you have navigated the social platforms, you've probably come to realize that people's motives are very different than you might expect that they would be. This really creates some real vulnerabilities. And this is the main reason I wanted to do this series, these particular social media, is that people on the caregiving journey, there's so much on our plate, and we can be vulnerable because we want hope. We want a listening ear. We want answers. We want to be around people kind of like us, maybe going through the same things we are. There's nothing worse than talking with someone who isn't going through what you're going through, and you have to kind of explain what you're talking about or how you're feeling. So some of these vulnerabilities can be anything from emotional manipulation and financial scams to misleading information. Some of the information may be about medication. It could be about other treatments, treatment options, or supplements. People say and post some of the darndest things, and you need to be able to navigate through it so that you don't become victim to some of these situations. And I'm not saying everybody's a scammer. Some people are well-meaning, but they don't take into account that their situation, maybe even the country they live in, is different than yours. And it's very easy to say something if you live in England that probably doesn't apply here in the United States. This is that new era of caregiving. And when it comes to a new responsibility, you need to pause, question what you're reading, what you're hearing, what's coming through your feed. You need to verify and double check what we see and hear before we act on it or assume, so that we're protecting ourselves. So awareness is no longer optional when it comes to social media advice, especially on caregiving. It is protective. And I like to talk about this and bring it up I don't hear a lot about this. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the precautionary side. I hear a lot of people talking about influencers who are on, and I can think of a particular family right now, and I won't name names, obviously, and I'm not being judgmental, but there was a particular family on, and they're still on social media, whose dad was walking through dementia. They never really said what type of dementia. And the dad is the greatest guy. Like, I just really, really appreciate his humor. I mean, he's just somebody that you could know. And actually, the son was the main character and main caregiver, although his wife was always in the background and now she's more in the forefront. But one of the things I noticed as it was going along, and it's probably been a couple years since they've been in my feed, and it's not something I look at all the time, but I've noticed some real changes. And they're kind of showing a lot of dad's vulnerable side. And really, they have made the series, right, more about them. And so you're seeing a lot of their inner family dynamics and some other things. And so I would just take to heart that their scenario is probably not your scenario. We all have our own situations, and the person that we care for is an individual. And I talked about this on the first series. Be careful what of their private life, their private issues that you expose on social media. Is that something you would do if they were well or didn't have dementia? So those are the things I really look at. But you'll see the characteristics of people change. Once you become an influencer, people take liberties. And I just want to make sure that my listening audience is not subject to that. It's your choice, obviously, but I'm just pointing it out. And I think a lot of you will relate to what I'm saying, but protect yourself and understand how to use social media and how not to use social media. So we're also going to talk about judgment. People will judge you for what you did or didn't do, or maybe even how you feel. That's not something that we should all subject ourselves to. Good information is one thing, but in our last episode, we talked about caregiving in the social media era and what happens and what helps and what hurts. But today, we're going to be going somewhere a little bit more uncomfortable, and uncomfortable on purpose, by the way. We're talking about what happens when people or caregivers, as they're posing as, judge other caregivers on social media. And maybe you've seen it, or maybe you've experienced it. Maybe, if we're honest, maybe you've done it yourself based on your own situation. But here's some of the comments that people might say, or you might see on social media in a support group or a site where they're a caregiver. Comments like, I would never put my mother in a home. Well, that's a pretty broad and bold statement to make, especially if someone is choosing that option or needs to do that because they simply cannot care for their own mother. They are choosing out of love to do something. Or medication is just a sedation. Those kinds of things, wow, they hold a lot of weight and carry a lot of judgment. And I assure you that these probably are not physicians or credentialed professional people who actually know what they're talking about. You gave up too soon, or you did the wrong thing. If you loved them more, you'd keep them at home. Those are really weighty and judgmental comments that people make loosely because they don't have anything in the game. They don't understand the full picture, and they are not aware of what resources you have or don't have. Why does this happen? Why do people do that? Certainly, caregiving is already hard enough. Why do we sometimes turn on each other? Let's unpack this a little bit. I did some research, of course, from my own experience, but just really dialoguing and talking about this. One of the things that came up is that judgment can be a defense against fear. Fear of this could be happening to me kind of thing. But let me start by asking you something. Have you ever heard someone say, I'll never do that about another caregiver's decision? Maybe it could be about placement, meaning in a memory care or a skilled nursing or a hospital or whatever the case might be. Maybe about hospice. There's a lot of misinformation about hospice and hospice support, especially in the United States, where hospice could offer a lot of palliative care and support. And certainly, maybe about medication. There's a lot of comments about medication based on the fact they don't have a lot of knowledge and they don't really know what's going on and whether this treatment is eliminating some symptoms to make care more manageable. These kinds of statements, they may sound confident, like they know what they're talking about. They may sound moral or certain, but underneath, it's usually fear. Fear that they may make this decision, or dementia is progressive, it's unpredictable, and it's terminal. When one caregiver places their loved one in a memory care, another caregiver watching may feel something uncomfortable rise up in them for fear that could be something that they may need to do someday. And the thought of that is terrifying for people. Nobody wants to think about something that they don't know or understand. Even though it's not a terrifying experience, it might be personally for individuals. The brain tries to restore control by saying things like, I would never do that. I'll handle it differently. And we all think that we will. And then when the time comes, perhaps we're not able to do so. They must not have tried hard enough. Wow, how condescending is that? And we hear things like that on social media. They just think it's black and white. They don't know all the circumstances. They're clueless, and they're certainly not there every day to help you. These are things that I want you to weigh when you might be someone who's saying something like this, or you might be the victim. Judgment becomes psychological protection. People do that a lot. And if your outcome is because you failed, then mine won't be. Here are just people's mechanisms of why or what the motive might be between some of these posts and things that they do. Here's a question you might want to ask. Is this judgment actually someone managing their own fear of what may be coming? Or maybe what they've gone through and they feel guilty about a decision they've had to make, or they're second guessing themselves. Guilt protection or guilt projection is something that we see a lot on social media. Let's talk a little bit about guilt, because we all know, those of us that have been on the journey know that caregiving can be saturated with guilt. And I know I experienced, families experienced, and I believe you have experienced this too, that you may feel guilty if you're tired or feel like you're worn out from caregiving. If you're irritated, you might also feel guilty about being irritated, but it happens to be your way to release emotions or cope. If you consider or are considering placement or have place someone in a assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing facility. What could I have done better? And there's nothing wrong with you analyzing that, but having someone outside, someone you don't even know, cast that on you is quite a different scenario. So maybe you feel guilty that you don't do enough, or you don't know what to do, or you do too much. There's all of these scenarios when it comes to caregiving in the dementia space. Now imagine someone carrying unresolved guilt and then seeing another caregiver make a decision they themselves are struggling with. Instead of processing their guilt inwardly, it becomes outwardly. And that's when we see the projection. And projection sounds like, you should have tried longer, or you medicated too fast, or you didn't advocate hard enough. Those are really some hard words for someone to throw at you. And I will tell you, if you ever threw those words at me, it wouldn't go very well for you. But I see this a lot on social media. And I see that people subject themselves to this. And this is what we're talking about today. I want you to think about who you're allowing to speak into your life, into your caregiving journey, because this could be very detrimental to you. It could put more weight on your shoulders than what you already have. Often what's happening internally when people do that is they're truly saying, I'm scared. I might make that choice too. That might be what it is. They may say, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I mean, that's a common thought. Even if people don't say it out loud, it is a common thought. And it's a normal thought to have. We don't want to go judging each other when we are just trying to walk through, and it's a coping mechanism. Or I feel ashamed for even thinking about it. Wow, that is very, very weighty. Judgment becomes displacement. And if I focus on your decision, I don't have to sit down with my own internal conflict. It's like projecting blame. We've all met people that do that. Maybe we've done it as a coping mechanism, but that's really what it is. And the ironic part of this is we've allowed people, or we may allow people in these posting in these social settings to do that to us. And I want to point it out and say, absolutely not. You do not have to tolerate that. You can cut that person off, or you cannot go on that platform. I mean, these decisions are yours. And please do not allow people that you don't even know, that you will never meet in your lifetime, lay guilt on you. And that's what this podcast is really about, is why this happens. The fact that it's happening is real, a reality. And I want to talk about it because I think that people may have experienced this or seen it and don't know what to do about it. And I just want to shed light on it. Is this criticism? Ask yourself this. Is this criticism revealing more about their unresolved guilt than about my actual decisions? Did I really just want to share the decisions I've come to or what I did? And now I'm receiving all this feedback when I wasn't really soliciting for advice. People give you advice all the time. You see it on different influencers and different posts. They give you advice you never even asked for because they think they can. They're bold enough to think that they can really speak into your life. And if you use this as a source of relating or a source of friendship or a source of comfort, you can do something when you run across this type of bullying, and you have a choice. Let's just talk about some of the cultural and religious conditioning that we see. Caregiving can be deeply cultural, and there can be some deep cultural expectations in and around caregiving, depending on the culture of the family, the culture of the area, the space. Have you ever heard things like, in our family, we take care of our own? Or in our culture, we don't put our parents in homes. And then even a religious stance, God will give you the strength. That may mean a lot to you, and that particular phrase would mean a lot to me, but it may not mean something to everyone. Those statements aren't inherently wrong, but they are value-based. And depending on you, values are not universal mandates. And we cannot assume that people in Japan or people in Europe or people in the United States all relate to those values the same. And although none of them are wrong, we're just not the same. We're not the same people. Different families operate within different cultural traditions, different religious frameworks, different financial realities. That's a big one. That's huge. I can give you lots of advice, but if you don't have the finances to make it happen, those options are not available to you. And that's going to produce defeat. It's going to produce guilt. And there are different support systems. Listen, in the United States, state to state, town to town, there are different support systems available. People will make statements. Oh, well, you should reach out to the Department of Elder Affairs. They will give you someone to come in and bathe your mom. Well, that's not exactly true. It might be true in certain areas that have that funding and have that support and whatever, but it may not be true in your state or your city. I remember living, when my mom first started needing a little bit more help, and I lived in a small county and a really small town, and I wasn't as familiar with some of the social services, senior services, whatever. And somebody inadvertently said, hey, you can call here and they'll provide you someone. Well, let's see. I called, they put me on a list, and 2 years later, I still hadn't ever received a call back for that particular service. So I quickly went to other options, and there are other options available, but just statements like that can be misinforming. When one framework assumes moral superiority over another, judgment often follows. And those are things that you don't want to get tied up in. But dementia does not adapt. Dementia does not adapt to cultural expectations. Neurodegeneration does not negotiate with tradition. Those are very strong and powerful statements, but they're fact. Neither one adapt or negotiate with cultural expectations or tradition. Although those factors are very helpful on the caregiving journey, they're not carved in stone. Some of the things that we need to ask ourselves when that comes into play, depending on where you fall in culture and tradition. And I hope that you have a strong culture and traditions that provide support. I hope that you do, but you may not. Is the critique what people are saying or posting, or just a statement, maybe even a neighbor said to you, is it culturally rooted? Could that be where people are coming from? Are they assuming their value system applies universally? And I'm going to tell you, I see that a lot. And it doesn't apply. It doesn't transfer. These are things for you to consider and just be aware of. Does my situation require a different solution? Absolutely. I will tell you that so-and-so may have taken vitamins and did this and did that and for their journey, and you are trying to apply that. You or your loved one have a whole different dementia. You're at a whole different place in the phase of your dementia, and what they're suggesting is going to have no impact on your situation whatsoever. I see that all the time. Dementia isn't universal. There are multiple diagnoses. There are multiple symptoms expressed. There are multiple stages of the long goodbye, all of those things. So that has to be taken into consideration before we make a flat statement and assume that everybody's going to be helped from whatever the case might be that I'm offering a solution. So there's no single morally superior caregiving path. Let me say that. There is no single morally superior caregiving path. There's only the safest, most sustainable path for you and your reality. That's the individuality to making choice that I like to talk about, that I want you aware of. The other thing that I want to get into in this segment is identity, threat, and scarcity. Let's talk about identity. When we talk about identity, for many caregivers, the role becomes central to who they are. I'm the strong one. I'm the devoted daughter. I will never give up. That identity can be empowering, very empowering, but it can also become rigid. Now imagine seeing another caregiver choose placement or hospice. If their decision is valid, then your identity as the one who never places is no longer the only noble path. And that can feel threatening. An identity threat often shows up as defensiveness. What is good for one family may not be good for another. And both of them could absolutely be right. Scarcity thinking will then follow. So if their decision is acceptable, then maybe mine isn't superior. That's how it works. And judgment protects identity. If I judge you, then I'm still right. These are the things that we see in the social media setting. We see it in families. We even see it in friendships, but we especially see it in social media platforms when it comes to caregiving and dementia and support and all of those things. It's just part of human nature. Ask yourself, is my decision threatening someone else's self-concept? Basically, people have to decide what's best for them. And when I say something, I generally want to say, this is the decision I made. It was the best decision for me. It may not be the best for you. These are the things that, boy, when you go back and analyze it, I think you're going to relate to some of this I'm saying, and you're going to go, oh, yeah, I never thought of it that way. I hope so. That is my purpose. And this particular podcast is I want to talk about all the avenues in the dementia caregiving journey. The social media amplification, I think, is what has been surprising to me over these last few years. Layering social media on top of all of this, online platforms kind of reward certainty. They reward bold statements. They reward outrage. They do not reward nuances. Short form content often says never medicate, never place, always fight. But dementia care in itself is rarely never or always. I can tell you as a fact that dementia care never or always should not apply. And those of us who made promises that we could not fulfill realize that once we get there, because we don't know what the journey is going to be until we get there and experience it. In reality, decisions in themselves are clinical decisions. They are and should be safely driven. They are stage dependent, meaning what my actual situation is at that time. And they're also family capacity influenced, like what is your family structure like? What is your support system like? Is there any family or not? And in many cases, there is not. When complex medical decisions are reduced to slogans, polarized statements, these things increase, but they may not apply to your situation. Caregivers become camps instead of community. This is what we do. This is what we do. And there is a lot of neutrality in finding and looking at your options, really evaluating all the things I've talked about and pointed out, and making good decisions for you. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to have to live with it and cope with it. Ask yourself, am I consuming content that simplifies complex care decisions into moral absolutes, or am I consuming content that open my eyes to options? And that's really what you want to be able to garner from your online platforms and experience. There are damages that come from judgments. Whether people talk about them or not, there is damage that judgment causes. Let's pause for a moment and consider the impact of what happens when caregivers are judged. Here's what happens. They may delay placement out of shame. I've seen it happen a lot. Family conflict or disagreement. People will delay getting the help they need, which is totally guilt-driven and only brings complexity to the caregiving scenario. They may avoid medication that can improve quality of life. Listen, over the years, there's been a lot of conflict in around medicating for behaviors. And there has been a lot of highlight on over-medicating and what we call snowing someone. And we focused on that so hard and so heavy that we forgot to focus on the benefit of treating things like anxiety or depression, which in other scenarios we would quickly treat. But in dementia, those symptoms may go on and may go untreated and may be complex for the individual with dementia and the caregiver. There are good treatments for symptoms. There's no cure, but certainly depression occurs in over 40% of dementia diagnosis. And listen, it's treatable. And we ought to try and create quality of life for someone. There are areas, if you have a loved one who is getting anxious at certain times of the day and suffering from anxiety, and you know they're suffering, their outbursts are due to they can't cope with it. For goodness sakes, let's treat the anxiety and give them a little bit of calm and peace in their life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And so we want to work closely with our healthcare professional and not avoid medication where medication is needed at the time medication's needed. And it might not be forever. It might be for a period of time. Caregivers who are judged may then begin to isolate out of fear that they're going to be criticized. They also may be reluctant to ask for help when they absolutely need help and are going to be judged for it. So please be aware of this and do not allow anyone unduly to judge you for your personal decisions that you feel like you need to make. Shame is not a therapeutic motivator. It isn't. Shaming anyone from a child into a caregiver is not a motivator. It doesn't ever bring about motivation. It silences more than it does anything. So in the care setting and dementia care, silence is dangerous because there is no prize for suffering the longest. There is no medal for collapsing last, okay? That just doesn't occur. And sustainability matters. Getting the help you need when you need it is important. And that's going to look different for you and me. How do we respond to all of this that I'm talking about without escalation? What do you do when judgment shows up? First, you don't have to respond, period. But you don't have to debate everyone. You do not have to address someone who addresses you on social media. Absolutely not. Don't have to do it. There are many options. You can block the person. You can mute the situation. You can scroll on. Certainly, non-engagement is always an option. There is no engagement police that's going to come. Setting boundaries in our life is not weakness. It is discernment. It is wisdom. You can have a neutral reframe and take the power right out of those statements by saying something as simple as, that decision was made by our medical team. We made the safest choice we could. Don't over-explain yourself. Do not apologize. You do not owe anyone an explanation. There needs to be an internal reality check. You need to ask yourself when this situation comes up on social media and even within family settings and you're the main caregiver. Does this person know my sleep schedule? Do they manage my loved one's aggression? Are they in my home? Do they really know the situation or even the diagnosis? If not, their opinion is totally incomplete. They do not have the data to even state an opinion. I mean, it's really that simple. It's hard, and I want to be compassionate with the truth here, but I want to state it because this kind of stuff goes on all the time. And here's something I want to say gently. Sometimes caregivers judge because they are drowning themselves. And drowning people don't always speak kindly. Understand that being understanding, being kind with them doesn't mean tolerating abuse, whether it's on social media or in a family situation. But it can help you not internalize it. Their fear and what they're projecting is not your failure. Their guilt is not your burden, and their rigidity is not your roadmap. these are powerful statements I want you to think about the next time, or if this could be happening to you. It is actually a fact. Do not empower people that you do not know or that do not live your circumstance, do not even contribute to judge you. Let's take a moment and redirect this a little bit and kind of reflect, because you might be guilty of maybe projecting this yourself. I think I've hit on why we might do that. Have you judged another caregiver recently? What fear might be underneath that? Are you tired? Are you fatigued? Do you feel like you're drowning? We're not at our best when we're dealing with things like that. Have I felt judged? Do I internalize it? As much as we like to say these things don't hurt, they do. They do. They weigh on us and we think about it. And maybe it's for a fraction of a second, but it really does impact us. What courageous decision have I made that others couldn't see the full context of? These are things that you could reflect on if you have experienced this at all. And caregiving evolves. That's something that's important, I think, to talk about. The early stage caregiver and the late stage caregiver may need completely different strategies. And I will tell you, as a dementia professional and a coach, absolutely that's a fact. Your needs in the early stage versus the late stage are going to be completely different. And diagnosis to diagnosis, situation to situation, they're not all going to be the same. Both are valid, but very different. Caregivers turning on caregivers is painful, but it is human. We operate as caregivers under chronic stress, ambiguous loss, sleep deprived, identity shifts, fear of decline or fear what's around the next corner. We're under pressure, and being under pressure causes defensiveness to surface. But here is what I want you to carry forward. This is really what I want you to get out of today's podcast is there is no moral superiority in exhaustion. There is no virtue in collapse, and there is no failure in choosing safety. Every caregiving decision exists within context: medical, emotional, financial, relational. You do not owe anyone martyrdom. You owe your loved one thoughtful care. You owe yourself preservation. And if you felt judged, pause and ground yourself. If you have judged, reflect and recalibrate. We're navigating a disease that does not play fair. Let's not make it harder by turning on each other. I hope that these social media episodes have been helpful and enlightening to you. And you may be someone who doesn't use social media, but you may run across someone on a journey that does and is impacted, or someone who might be taking information that they haven't really thought through in making their decisions. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Thank you for joining me on the Disappearing Mind podcast. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode, visit our website to suggest future topics, and share the podcast with friends and family.